So yeah, today we will talk a little bit about cloud. I have directly the question, who of you worked with the cloud before, with Magento Cloud? How many of you liked it? Okay, then I guess this presentation will be the people who never worked with it. And also I'll basically try maybe to give you more information about the points maybe you never worked with, and maybe I'm not sure you will change your opinion, because honestly you can change your opinion to working with cloud only if you'll make several projects. And if you will not change it after several projects, then I guess that's done. That's all. But yeah, shortly about myself first. My name is Alex. I'm a Magento technical team lead at Commerce. We are top cloud integrator in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. Last 1.5 years, we launched approximately 8 projects on Magento Cloud. It was all Pro, Magento Cloud Pro. Yeah, also I'm Magento community maintainer and master of this year, but today I'll not talk anything about the contribution, so we will focus totally on a cloud. So firstly, about the cloud itself. Basically, cloud is a managed automated hosting platform for Magento. In other words, that's a service that Magento provides to the customers. Here is a very important point, that's not like you managing everything. That's 3 parties who are participating in the development process. It's always Adobe, it's you like a company or integrator, and it's your client. So in this case, very important point, don't try to make a work which is not in your responsibility. Don't waste resources of your company, and use Adobe on places where it's required or where it's Adobe's responsibility. So the technology stack looks like this colorful burger, where when we have Amazon Web Services on the ground, we have Git, then come in Magento with BI and B2B module. B2B is available only for Pro. And then we have a profiling system like New Relic and Blackfire, and then we have CDN on the top, like a cherry. It's a Fastly. So let's imagine you got a project. Then you have several phases of the project. First phase is the welcome call. That's happening between you, Magento, and the client. From my experience, clients are never really listening. Not here, not in onboarding call. They always there. On our projects, I guess only one time I heard that the client asked some questions after that. Mostly they're listening and telling that they understand everything. They're not. They mostly then asking the same questions again and again, which already was on onboarding. So be ready for that. Then come in hardware handoff. It's approximately in 2 weeks. So that's 2 weeks is the time which Adobe takes for prepare all server and environment for you and for your project. Then come in the development phase. That's basically, I wrote here 3-6 months, but it can be any time. I mean, our fastest cloud project was 2 weeks. It was 2 weeks project for B2B customer. And then having the pre-launch call, and then go live with MBI connected. So you have basically all this managed by Adobe. If you have the long development phase, usually we got every 2-3 weeks some emails from Adobe asking how the process is going on, how is the status of it, do we have any problems. Then we have post-live health check. That's also happening by Adobe. Usually we are not taking a part in that. Only a couple of times we got some reporting from Adobe that there is some performance issue on some of the parts of the shop. And then yeah, we found some memory leaks, for example, in our code. But that's basically again not your responsibility in this case. You have always on your project, you have always the contact person who is leading this project, who is helping you, and you have support board. I guess the guys who worked with Adobe know that support board is a pain, is a real pain. But what we usually mentioned that if we have some tickets or some issues which are really required to fix quickly, if we will contact our contact person, he can escalate it and he can always change the priority of this ticket if it's really valuable. So always remember that Adobe is getting money for that. It's getting money from your client. And Adobe is really interested to promote and to integrate the cloud projects. This means they want to help you. They not always can help you because they have support team of the people who are not really, I don't know, I guess they want to help you, but maybe they not always know that. Yeah, and basically on our first phases, we have integration dev environment. And then when you start into development, you already have another environments available. It's staging and production environments if you're talking about Pro. Initially, your project looks like this. That's a cloud interface of your project. You have master branch and then some other custom branch. I would never recommend start to develop or fetch something on this state. Just give time for Adobe to make them work ready. You can start with development of the features like extension. Locally, that's not a problem. But I would wait till you will see something like this. When you have already everything prepared, you have master branch, production stage, integration, and then come in the custom branches, which you can basically create yourself. We have two like packages. It's a starter, cloud starter, and cloud pro. We work only with one starter project. It was basically first one, most painful one. Not because it was starter, just because we had no experience with it. That was the project where we thought, okay, cloud, never ever more again. That's basically changed. Then we switched to Pro. And we get already more experience. And Pro also give us a lot of positive. And these positives come from the infrastructure itself. First of all, if you're talking about B2B, I mean, the Adobe will always sell you Pro because B2B is available. And from like price point of view, there are no sense to buy a starter and then pay additionally for B2B. If you're talking about B2B, that's required a lot of performance. That means that your customer has a really big stock and you need this performance. And Pro, also available with a much powerful servers. You have production server and staging like a dedicated servers. You have integration environment also separate. You have 3 nodes for staging and production. So you have like a load balancer with 3 nodes where the whole traffic is balanced to. Yeah. And shortly about environment, that's what I saw. The starter has basically only one main branch. It's a master. That's your production system. And then come in the integration branches. That's branches where you're developing and testing your code. And this master branch is also only one node, single server, where you're doing the code. If you're talking about Pro, my favorite one, it's much more convenient and much more powerful system. You have production environment. As dedicated server, you have staging also with the 3 nodes for both of them. Then you have integration environment, which can contain up to 5 active branches and limited amount of inactive branches. So that basically active branches mean you have the real link where you can test and deploy one particular branch. Let's say for your QS team, test it, and then you can merge it back to integration, for example. And then you also have the global master, which we made a mistake here. We never used it, but you basically have to. We use it on current project. That's a branch which it's like similar. It's an exact copy of your production, and it's recommended when you make a production deployment and put your website live, make one more merged back to global master, and that's a branch when you can debug. So you can like have, let's say, Xdebug available there, and you can debug, and it's the same infrastructure as production, so it's a little bit easier to troubleshoot there. And configuration. So you're not only responsible for the code, you're also responsible for configuring your system that it works correctly with the hardware that Magento is providing. You have 4 main configuration files. It's Magento app YAML. It's defining the build and deploy phases. I will tell about this a little bit later. We have environment where you define all environment variables. which are also responsible for deployment. Basically mostly for deployment and for the states how your system is behave. We have routes. It's configured basically like main is the redirects. So if you migrated from Magento 1 to Magento 2 or from any other system where you need the redirects, put it there. Cloud is using Nginx. This means you can forget about htaccess and write in some redirects inside of the htaccess. And then we have a services YAML, which we use quite widely. That's a file when you define in the services you need, like RabbitMQ, Redis. You can change your version there of them if you want to update or downgrade, depends from your system. This file, you have to edit it to apply the changes, but they will not be applied. You have to make a ticket for Magento support that they applied on production environments. So this means you cannot break anything quite easy there. If you, let's say, back merge from integration to production or from staging to production where was another setting, you cannot then break production with it. If you're making some service changes, make a ticket for Magento for that. Debugging on a cloud. You have a lot of places where you have a logs, but you don't need to remember all this. It's shortly, you have var, like root var of the server, which contains the standard server logs, including mail logs, Nginx logs, error access, all those. And you have Magento logs, and small different with the var, you also have this platform logs that's related to your project, where you have for staging, you have the project ID and then staging and then come in, let's say, PHP access and post-deploy logs, and also cloud logs. So that's a separate, there's a special logs which has only cloud for you to troubleshoot what's going wrong. Mostly we use it for deployment troubleshooting, which happens unfortunately quite often. That's a read-only file system. So you can totally forget about some echoes, var dumps in the code, and I'll fix it quickly on production and nobody will mention it. That's impossible. You always have to push. But at the same time, you have Xdebug available on all environments. You can just enable it, and then you can debug there. So making process a little bit easier. I would not enable it on production system. That's why you have the global master. Then we have Cloud CLI. That's another fancy tool. That's kind of, if you like the command line interface, that's basically for you. You can get all information about the environments you have. You have big set of the commands. You don't need to read it, just mention there are a lot of them. You can configure the environment variables with it. You can create any users. By the way, about the users, when you sign the contract, you're not getting access to the cloud. It's getting your client, because he is contact person so the contract is making between him and Adobe. This means if you want to add like user, please always ask him to make a super admin user for you. Otherwise, you will waste huge amount of time trying to reach him and tell, hey, I need one more user who has this permission or this permission. Because as I said before, on onboarding phase, they never listen. This means they has no idea what to do. Mostly, if they forgot to do on the super user, we get in then they log in and password for the Magento Cloud, and they tell them, do please everything yourself. I have no idea what is going on here. Good. Are you still with me? Yeah. Good. Then let's go to deployment. Deployment, that's, I guess, the headache of everybody who work with the cloud. How many people who work with the cloud had a problem with deployment? Well, it's at least half of the people who work with the cloud. Okay. So the deployment workflow looks like follows, and it's quite standard not only for cloud but for any other development company, I guess. So you have a local development, then you have your active branches where you push in. So we have till 5 active branches on integration environment where you can push and send the links to the QS team that they tested. Then you merge into integration. That's kind of your dev. Then we merge into staging, testing there, then production, then global master. If you want to proceed with the testing or you want to be stable and have possibility to react quickly. Deployment phase, so the deployment happen in the cloud always when you push in the code. So wherever branch is it, when you push in the code, directly starting the deployment hooks. There's 3 phases, is build, deploy, and post-deploy. They configured basically in Magento app YAML, which you can control of, but I never had a case where when we have to change something in those commands, but you can add something in addition if you want to add some custom scripts or implementation on one of those phases. So what's going on basically? We have build phase, which basically run not on your server, it's run on cloud infrastructure server. Is there no maintenance mode? It's running on a background. It's applying the patches for your Magento if you have some. It's regenerate the code and all dependency injections. It also looks inside of the environment, inside of the config.php file and apptc config.php. It's compressing static files if there are. I'll come to this bit later. And then basically it's prepare the Slack and deploy the Slack already on your environment and connect all services. So it's prepare all services, let's say Elasticsearch, Redis, then get in your code and connect that they all work together. On a build phase, your Magento has no access to any service. This means you have no database access, no Redis, nothing. It's just pure code and PHP. Then come in the deploy phase, where is maintenance mode is enabled. On maintenance mode, definitely, yeah, your website is offline. And then it's starting basically, so the main stuff and main consuming time what it's doing is bin Magento setup upgrade and static content deploy if it's in this phase. So if the static content deploy is in deploy phase, then your website is down and you have a real problems. I mean, it's taken really a lot of time. It may take like from 5 minutes if you have super lightweight website till couple of hours, which we definitely don't want to. And then it's possible to move the static content compilation inside of the build phase. It's happening not on our server, it's happening on the Adobe integration environment, which is much, much faster, has much more resources than your production system. And the process happening quite much, much faster. And then basically the whole system, including static content, copied on your production system. That's, I guess everybody knows this picture. That's compiling the static content. That's one of our projects, so it's compiling for each team and also for each language you have on your system. So let's say this one took 1 hour approximately. It has 4 teams. So yeah, 5 basically. Don't forget you have base and Luma. If your template is using Luma like a basics, and then also one custom. So this project, for example, has a custom team developed not by our team, which is use Luma like a base. And then when we want to change something, we definitely create one more. So we have 4 teams. And then we have 7 languages there. And also backend. Also backend compile for all active languages in the system. So what you can do basically in your environment file, you can tell which teams do not compile in this way, or which teams, like which languages you want to compile for this team. So I would recommend just find out who is working with your backend environment and compile languages, only languages you really need. So let's say in our case, we compile only English. And in this case, we reduce compilation already of like 6 steps if we are not compiling the backend for other languages. The same for the team. In this way, you just exclude team from the compilation. And here, my pain, never use the custom templates, please. So yeah, that's also possible to migrate the static content deploy from deploy to the build phase. For that, you have to go to your environment, let's say on production. You using the ECE tool, so that's this command which is making dump of your config.php file. Then it's you copy this apptc config.php to your local environment, add it to the Git and pushing it. What's happening in this case, basically, your config.php, after you make the dump, will contain not only information about modules you have enable or disable, it's also contain all information about websites, stores, store views, disable, enable modules, standard, locales, all will be there, including the backend locale. And also the information from the dev section, like JavaScript and CSS rules, like do you need to minify, do you want to merge them, and so on. Why this happening? That's happening because, as I said, on build phase, you have no access to your services. You have no access to the database, for example, which contain all this information. This means the deployer cannot create the static content because he has no idea which websites or which teams you have or which languages you have. That's why it's skipped, and then it's happening only on a step when you get an access to the database. So yeah, in this case, your config PHP contain all this information, and tool which doing the build phase, it's basically have all this. It's tools which doing the build phase. It's have all this information and can correctly compile the static content. But don't be surprised and be ready for your clients who will ask you why they cannot change the language. It's happening basically because of this one, because locale is defined in your config PHP. In the backend of Magento, this is blocked. You cannot just do anything here. You have to change it in the config and recompile in this case. But you can change the stores and website structure. That's possible in a backend. Just please never forget about this. If you change something in any environment, in your stores and website, and if you're using the config PHP pre-compiled, update it always. We had a lot of issues when we forgot to do it, and we compiled, let's say, wrong static content. Also, the Magento itself reading from this file, and we have a lot of issue that the order will just go to another website. Just totally not expected. So that's quite important. You have to remember if you're changing the websites or store view structure, always compile it. Time is coming. Okay, I'll speed up. So you can skip HTML minification. You don't mostly need it for development. You may need it for production, but that will increase your time. You can skip the whole static content deployment at all. I mean, why you need it? I mean, who need a front end? This white page with the blue links is awesome. But yeah, if you use the headless websites, you don't need the static content deployment. You can also make static content on demand. So you are not compile it, but it will be pre-warmed, and then when you open the page, it will be generated, making deployment much faster. Website slower after you open it first time. But you can pre-warm the pages, which is most often used by defining the post-deploy here. So you just define which pages for which stores you want to pre-warm. That's a load compression. If you're basically not doing static content deploy, it's like the fastest one. That's the standard. So you can skip here the static content deploy, move on build, and skip HTML minification. That's basically the best case if you have the front end available. Hotfixes patches. I lied. I will talk today about the contribution. The way what we are usually doing, if you find in the core bug, we are not trying to fix it, make a lot of rewrites in the code and so on. That's not really valuable for us. What we are doing, we're making the pull request to the Magento 2 repo with a fix, and then based on this pull request, you can create the Git page. And then this Git page, you can just put in your M2 hotfixes folder, and it will be automatically deployed and applied. This means you're not providing a lot of rewrites of your code. You minimize your development time. You're making the nice stuff. You're doing the contribution in Magento. And also with next update, if this issue is fixed, you can just delete it from this folder, and it will be also automatically removed. Fastly, we have Fastly available for all cloud environments. It's content delivery network. All traffic goes through it. Super speed up the performance for your system. It also has DDoS protection and a web application firewall and also image optimization. So it's really increased basically the response time of your website if it's cached, and it's replacement of the full page cache. One advice if you use, I mean, you will use Fastly definitely on the cloud, but do and configure it before you made any development. It's much easier than to troubleshoot. Just make it works, configure it, check all works, then you can do the development. Configuration is happening just in Magento backend. Just one funny stuff that for Pro you have to go to your file system to find the tokens. If you don't know this path, you will have a lot of questions. For starter, their own environment variables. Prepare Fastly for go live. I would recommend do it before go live directly. No way. Okay, I have to speed up again. So you can do it directly before go live. Oh, sorry, not before go, directly when you already started to development. That will save you a lot of time before go live. You can create 2 subdomains, post them to the TXT records that Magento will send you, make them a ticket, and they validate SSL, and then your system is ready for work with Fastly, and you don't need to repeat it. I mean, you have to make just small steps before go live again. There is Fastly validation health check. That's a page where you just paste your website URL and it will validate if Fastly configured correctly. Have no time. So we have profiling available. It's New Relic and Blackfire. Does everybody know what New Relic is? Yeah. Good. Okay, then we'll be faster. So you can just activate it. It will be available on your staging and production environment. If you don't know, it's the profiling system which show you this fancy statistic about all usage, including like MySQL queries, processes, what's going on in the system. One more screenshot. You have Blackfire also available there. It's another profiling system. You just have to enable it and you will get all statistics. You can get all this from your project UI page. It's all the credentials, how to configure available there. And you will get this page after you get the project. Last one. That's like a little bit fun in the end. Life with cloud is not so easy, especially on a pro environment. So first of all, we didn't mention first two projects. We mentioned it only on a second one, on a third one when the client calls us and tell what's going on. So the first one, do you see any problems here on this customer table?
You used my private data.
No, it's not private. Sorry, you are maintainer. So basically this one. That's an IDs customer called and told where customer number 5 and 6 they cannot register. Do you have any problems? What's going on? For Pro plans, the production environment has a 3-node infrastructure, so it's using auto-increment for all IDs in the table set to 3. This means they all will be different. And I know that Magento will tell me we are not rely on any IDs. We have to, like, you should be don't care about the IDs in a database. Say this to our tax officer, who really asking us where the invoice with those numbers here or those numbers. Are you trying to cheat us? Like you have some black money or so? Yeah, that's basically the problem. And yeah, we have here the small module that's fixing this particular problem for the cloud. Not maybe very clean, not ready for merging. We didn't really review it too much. It works on our 2 projects, which is fine for us. But if somebody will get a better idea how to implement it, feel free. Yeah, that's basically almost all. I guess I told why we use in cloud. I mean, it has no problems with the hardware. You have all services which you usually have to pay for, like Fastly, New Relic. They're available out of box. You have 99% cloud availability SLA. You have performance monitoring tools. Magento is monitoring your website. And this one is basically awesome. We didn't know that when we work with a project. They scale your system in a case if there are some events that come in, or like Black Friday. Your system will be scaled for free automatically, and you have nothing to worry about performance. Yeah, done.
Thank you very much for your speech. Please, we have 5 minutes. Okay, not 5 minutes, little less, for questions.
Hello, Alex. Thank you for a great topic. I have a question about deployment. Is there any option to schedule deployment? For example, if I want to do production deployment in non-business time, for example, in the middle of the night, can I do this? Or
you can do it. You can wake up in the night and make a good push. But basically not. It's not. I mean, always when you're making a push, the deployment is started. You have no control over it.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks for a nice presentation. The question is, you mentioned you launched a few projects over the last few years. Mm-hmm. I just wonder if you had any major downtimes or any substantial periods of time when the system was down.
The biggest downtimes is the static content compilation. We have this problem only on one project because we have compilation on deploy phase that's caused by that we're using the custom team.
I finished my question. Yeah. And downtime related due to sales, volume of sales, or maintenance of the platform from the Magento side, not related to the deployment?
No, never.
Thank you.
Just one last question.
Hi, thanks for this presentation. And question is, do you know how it's built internally? I mean, how it's auto-scaled? Is it like AWS, ECS, or EKS, Kubernetes used or not? So it's quite interesting how it's built internally.
I will write this question down and we'll get you more information, I guess, because I cannot answer this question now. Yes, they're using AWS, which has auto-scale there, but I don't know the more details.
Thanks.
Thank you for the presentation. Two questions. First, is there any possibility to set up Magento Commerce Cloud ourselves as a dev team? And second question, is there a way to integrate deploy notifications with Slack like it's happening with Bitbucket and Jenkins?
Yeah, that's technically possible with a GitLab, for example. Yeah, we're using the GitLab and I try now to implement the deployment with a GitLab so that we can work on our own repository, push the code there, and then deploy on demand. That's technically possible. I can share, when I'm done, I can share this information somewhere on a Git. It's still in progress. And the first question was, yeah, I mean, if you have the cloud like project, cloud is standard Magento. You have no big issues with that, so you can just install it locally. You can make a dev environment, but it will not be like the same dev as cloud has, like with the 3 nodes and all this stuff. But again, that's not a problem. What we are trying now to achieve in our company is we're trying to use a GitLab where you have an own dev environment. And every time when we push in the code, we test on our environment. And when we want to deploy, we just use the GitLab pipelines for that. So technically, yes, that's possible. I have no real examples now.
Okay, thank you.
Let's thank for the great speech.